It was supposed to be a peaceful Saturday morning. My 10-year-old son, Ethan, was outside on our driveway, humming to himself while lining up his collection of toy cars. That was his comfort, his safe world. Ethan had autism, and though he didn't always talk much, he communicated through actions and patterns. Across the street, Karen, the self-appointed HOA enforcer, was trimming her bushes with an air of superiority. Every few minutes she would glance over, scowling at Ethan as if his presence alone disrupted her perfectly manicured view. I tried to ignore it. After all, it wasn't the first time she'd complained about us, the non-compliant family with a son who makes too much noise. I was inside working on a few legal files when I heard shouting. I ran outside to find Karen on her phone, pacing in front of our driveway. "Yes, officer, there's a suspicious child here. He's been standing outside for hours, won't talk, won't move. I think he's dangerous." Dangerous? My heart dropped. She was calling the police. On my autistic son. I rushed to Ethan, who was frozen in confusion, clutching one of his cars tightly. "Buddy, it's okay," I whispered, kneeling next to him. "You're safe." He didn't fully understand what was happening, but he could sense my tension. Within minutes, 2 patrol cars pulled up. Karen crossed her arms smugly, as if she'd just done the neighborhood a favor. "That's him," she said, pointing at my child. "He's been loitering and—" I stood, stepping between the officers and Ethan. "Good morning, officers. I believe there's been a misunderstanding." One officer looked hesitant, while the other moved closer, his hand resting on his belt. "Ma'am, can we talk to the boy?" "You can talk to me," I replied, holding my badge wallet in my hand, still closed. My tone was calm, but the heat in my chest was rising. Karen's eyes rolled. "Of course you'll defend him. Parents like you never teach your kids to follow the rules." That was it. I took a deep breath, my voice firm but level. "My son has autism. He isn't loitering. He's playing on our own property." The younger officer's expression softened. "Ma'am, we didn't realize—" But Karen cut in, shouting, "I don't care what excuse you people make. This is an HOA community, not a daycare." I turned toward her slowly, finally flipping open my badge. The golden seal of the district attorney's office glinted in the sunlight. Karen froze mid-sentence, her face drained of color. The officers exchanged glances. Both instantly straightened up. "Ma'am," I said, my voice low but controlled, "you just called 911 on the district attorney's son. Let's see how that plays out." For the first time since we'd moved into that neighborhood, Karen had nothing to say. The officers' faces shifted from confusion to instant alarm the moment my badge caught the light. "District attorney?" one of them said, stepping back slightly. "That's right," I said, tucking the badge away again. "Now, let's talk about why 2 police units were dispatched to a 10-year-old boy playing quietly on his own driveway." Karen's lips parted, but no sound came out. For once, her endless stream of complaints had been silenced. She blinked, her confidence faltering like a balloon losing air. The older officer cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we're sorry. We received a call about suspicious activity. We didn't, know the situation." "I understand," I said, my voice steady. "But next time, I suggest dispatch asks more questions before sending armed officers into a situation involving a child with a disability." Ethan was still clutching his toy car, rocking slightly. I crouched beside him and whispered, "Hey, champ, everything's fine now. The officers are leaving." He nodded slowly, his little hand trembling as he slid his car back into the line he had made earlier, restoring order to his small world. Karen finally found her voice. I didn't mean any harm. I just thought he was acting strange. You can't blame me for being concerned." I turned toward her, my expression unreadable. Concerned or inconvenienced? Because from what I've seen, you've made it your personal mission to control everyone on this street. Her face reddened. "You people think you're above the rules just because you have a title." I smiled faintly. No, Karen. I enforce the rules. The real ones, not the ones you invent in your HOA handbook. The younger officer coughed awkwardly. Ma'am, we'll file a note in the system that this was a misunderstanding. Won't happen again. Appreciated, I said, keeping my tone formal. But I'll also be filing a statement. A false report, particularly one involving a minor with a disability, is not something that should be brushed off. Karen's eyes widened. A false report? I didn't lie. I looked her dead in the eye. You said a child was acting dangerously. That's a lie. You created unnecessary police involvement, which could have traumatized him, or worse. Her mouth opened again, but no words came out. The officers excused themselves quickly, clearly wanting to get as far away from this as possible. As their cars pulled off, the quiet of the neighborhood returned, broken only by the soft rattle of Ethan's toy cars. Karen stood frozen for a long moment before storming back to her yard. But even as she slammed her door, I could see the tremor in her hands. For the first time, she knew she had crossed a line she couldn't simply smooth over with a fake apology. Later that evening, I sat at my desk, typing up a brief report for the record, a habit drilled into me by years of work. I wasn't doing this for revenge. I was doing it because people like Karen needed accountability. Ethan came in quietly, wearing his dinosaur pajamas. Mommy, am I in trouble? My heart clenched. No, baby. You did nothing wrong. Someone just made a mistake. He thought for a second. The policeman was loud. I didn't like that. I know, I said softly, pulling him close. But they won't bother you again. I promise. He smiled faintly and went to bed. I sat there for a long time after that, staring at the blinking cursor on my computer screen, thinking about how close things could have gone differently. I'd seen it too many times. Innocent situations spiraling out of control because of ignorance, prejudice, or plain arrogance. But now, this was personal. The next morning, I woke up to an email from the HOA president. The subject line read, "Incident at Willow Lane. Urgent discussion requested." Oh, this was going to be interesting. When I arrived at the community center later that afternoon, Karen was already there, sitting stiffly with a stack of papers in her lap. Her usual confidence was replaced by nervous energy, tapping foot, darting glances. The president, an older man named Richard, greeted me awkwardly. Mrs. Carter, thank you for coming on short notice. There's been some misunderstanding we'd like to clear up. Karen jumped in before he could continue. I was only trying to protect the neighborhood. You can't blame me for calling the authorities when something looks suspicious. I placed my folder on the table, sliding it across toward Richard. This is the police report from yesterday, along with a legal note citing potential misuse of emergency services. Richard's eyes widened slightly. You're filing a formal complaint? I haven't yet, I said evenly. But I wanted to see how the HOA plans to handle this internally first. Karen slammed her hands on the table. You can't threaten us. I have every right. No, I interrupted quietly. You don't have the right to harass families or make false accusations, and you certainly don't have the right to endanger a child. The room went silent. Finally, Richard spoke. Mrs. Miller, he said, turning to Karen, we'll need to review your conduct. This is serious. Karen's jaw dropped. You're taking her side? Richard sighed. You involved the police in something that clearly didn't warrant it. That reflects badly on the entire association. Her glare shot daggers at me, but I didn't flinch. I'd spent my career facing criminals in courtrooms. One angry neighbor didn't scare me. As I stood to leave, I looked at her one last time. Next time, Karen, think before you dial 911. You might save yourself a lot of trouble. Her lips trembled, but she stayed silent. Outside, the evening air felt cleaner, freer. For once, justice wasn't just something I fought for in court. I had defended it at home. A week passed before I heard from the HOA again. The quiet was almost suspicious. No passive-aggressive emails, no friendly reminders taped to mailboxes. For a brief moment, it felt like peace had returned to Willow Lane. But deep down, I knew Karen wasn't the type to surrender quietly. The notice came on a Thursday afternoon, slipped under my door in an envelope embossed with the HOA's seal. It read, "Notice of formal hearing. Regarding incident involving resident Karen Miller and the Carter family. Attendance mandatory. Friday, 6 p.m., Community Hall." I almost laughed. Mandatory? They must have forgotten who they were dealing with. Still, I went. Not out of obligation, but because I wanted this over with. I wanted my son to play outside without fear. And I wanted Karen to understand that rules didn't give her a license to target families who didn't fit her narrow definition of normal. The community hall buzzed with low chatter when I arrived. About 30 residents had shown up, more than I expected. Word had spread fast. At the front of the room sat the HOA board, Richard in the middle, flanked by 2 other members trying to look impartial. And beside them, sitting ramrod straight in a coral blazer, was Karen Miller. She looked as if she'd stepped straight out of a corporate brochure. Polished smile, tightly curled hair, a folder of evidence neatly stacked in front of her. But her eyes gave her away. They darted toward me with a mix of bitterness and fear. Richard cleared his throat into the microphone. "All right, everyone. Let's come to order. We're here to address the complaint regarding an incident involving law enforcement and 2 residents of Willow Lane." He gestured toward me. "District Attorney Carter, you have the floor." I rose calmly. "Thank you, Richard." My voice echoed across the quiet room. What happened last week wasn't a misunderstanding. It was harassment. My 10-year-old son, who is on the autism spectrum, was playing quietly in our driveway when Mrs. Miller decided he looked suspicious and called the police. A murmur rippled through the crowd. 2 squad cars arrived, I continued. Officers approached him while he was frightened and confused. This could have ended in trauma, or worse. My son deserves to feel safe in his own neighborhood. Karen suddenly interjected, "I didn't harass anyone. I was doing my civic duty." I looked straight at her. "Your civic duty doesn't include calling emergency services on children who make you uncomfortable. That's not civic responsibility, that's prejudice." The room fell silent again. One of the board members, a younger woman named Janelle, frowned at Karen. "You called 911 without verifying anything first?" Karen's chin jutted up. He was pacing, making noises, waving his hands. I thought he might be dangerous. A few people gasped quietly. Janelle leaned back, clearly unimpressed. "So, a kid flapping his hands was enough for you to involve the police?" Karen's confidence faltered. "Well, yes, how was I supposed to know he wasn't—" I stepped forward. "Because you could have asked me, your neighbor. We've lived here 3 years. You've seen my son dozens of times. You knew who he was." Karen's face flushed crimson. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Richard cleared his throat again. "Mrs. Miller, the board has reviewed the police report. It states that officers found no suspicious activity and that your call was unfounded. Do you have any explanation?" Karen fumbled with her folder, pulling out papers and photos, none of which supported her case. "I was just concerned about safety. You know how things are these days." A man in the crowd stood up. "Karen, this is ridiculous. That boy's never hurt a fly. You called cops on a child because he was different." More murmurs erupted, this time louder, disapproval spreading like wildfire. A woman whispered to her friend, "She's gone too far this time." Another shook her head. Karen's voice wavered. "I was trying to protect the neighborhood," I interrupted gently but firmly. "And in doing so, you endangered it." The words hung in the air like thunder. Richard folded his hands. "Mrs. Miller, after reviewing this matter, the board finds your conduct inappropriate and harmful to the community. You will be fined for misuse of HOA authority and subject to 6 months suspension from community voting privileges." Karen's mouth fell open. "You're suspending me?" "Yes," Richard said bluntly. "You violated community trust. And we will also require you to issue a written apology to the Carter family." The hall erupted, half in relief, half in disbelief. Karen's reputation, built on micromanaging every mailbox and lawn blade in the subdivision, was unraveling right in front of her. After the meeting, people approached me one by one, some offering apologies for not speaking up sooner, others thanking me for handling it professionally. I smiled politely, grateful but exhausted. As I was about to leave, Karen approached, clutching her folder to her chest. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "You've humiliated me." I met her gaze. "No, Karen. You did that yourself. All I did was hold you accountable." She swallowed hard, eyes glistening, and turned away. Outside, the sun was setting, gold light spilling over the rows of identical houses. Ethan was waiting with my sister by the car, playing with a bubble wand. When he saw me, his face lit up. "Mom! Look! I made the biggest bubble ever!" I knelt beside him, smiling. "You sure did, champ." For the first time in weeks, the tension in my chest eased. The storm had passed and justice, real, quiet justice, had prevailed. But as I looked back at the community hall, one thought lingered. People like Karen didn't change overnight. They just went silent, until the next time they thought they could get away with it. And when that day came, I'd be ready. It had been 2 weeks since the HOA hearing. 2 quiet, glorious weeks. No late-night complaints, no smug emails from Karen Miller, no officers knocking at my door. For once, Willow Lane actually felt like a neighborhood again. But peace never lasts long when pride is wounded. It was a cloudy Saturday morning when I saw her again. Karen stood across the street, arms crossed, staring at my driveway as if it had personally offended her. Her coral blazer was gone, replaced by yoga pants, a messy bun, and a look that screamed unfinished business. Ethan was sitting beside me on the porch, building his Lego set. I could feel his shoulders tense when he noticed her. "It's okay, buddy," I said softly. "She's not gonna bother you." But I wasn't entirely sure of that, because when Karen Miller lost control, she didn't just sulk. She retaliated. The retaliation came in subtle ways at first. Trash scattered mysteriously over my front lawn. HOA notices slipped into my mailbox about unsightly toys visible from the street. Someone even filed an anonymous complaint that my porch light was too bright. It was textbook Karen behavior, petty, vindictive, and ultimately self-destructive. By Wednesday, I decided enough was enough. I gathered all the notices, photographed the scattered trash, and pulled the HOA bylaws from my office drawer. As district attorney, I was used to dealing with criminals, but dealing with Karen? That was an entirely new level of patience. That afternoon, I paid a visit to the HOA office, a beige building that smelled like stale coffee and overconfidence. Richard, the HOA president, looked up from his desk as I entered. "Carter," he sighed. "Let me guess. Karen again?" I dropped the stack of papers in front of him. "I'm not here to complain. I'm here to file an official motion." He raised an eyebrow. "A motion?" "Yes," I said coolly. "For harassment under HOA Procedural Code 5.2, repeated targeting of a single household after disciplinary action." Richard leaned back, whistling low. "You're serious about this?" "Very." He rubbed his temples. "All right, we'll handle it internally. Maybe this'll finally get her off your back." But something in his tone told me even he didn't believe that. 3 days later, it escalated. I came home from work to find blue and red flashing lights outside my house. Again. My stomach dropped. Ethan was standing on the porch beside my sister, eyes wide with confusion. 2 officers were speaking to them, and next to the patrol car, Karen stood with her arms flailing, yelling something about noise violations. I parked, stepped out, and approached calmly, my badge still clipped to my belt from work. "What seems to be the problem, officers?" I asked. The taller one turned, instantly recognizing me. "Oh, District Attorney Carter. Ma'am, sorry about this. We were just, responding to a call from Ms. Miller here." Karen spun around. Your son was screaming. It sounded like he was attacking someone. I have every right to call. I cut her off sharply. He was in his therapy session, Karen. He gets frustrated sometimes. It's called emotional regulation. The officer frowned. We already confirmed that, ma'am, he said to Karen. The therapist explained everything. Karen's voice rose. I'm sick of your excuses. He's disruptive. He's a child, I finished coldly. And you're an adult harassing him. I turned to the officers. Gentlemen, thank you for responding. I'll take it from here. The officers exchanged glances, nodded, and began walking back to their car. But before they left, one of them muttered under his breath, She's really asking for trouble. Karen heard it. Her face twisted into a sneer. Oh, I am? You think you're untouchable because you're the DA? I'll get you kicked out of this neighborhood if it's the last thing I do. I stepped closer, calm but firm. Karen, this isn't a neighborhood issue anymore. You've crossed into legal territory. Her smirk faltered. Legal? What are you talking about? I reached into my bag and handed her a crisp envelope. You're being served with a cease and desist order for harassment, defamation, and filing false police reports. She blinked, confused. You can't do that. I just did. Her face went pale as the officers overheard and looked back from their car. Ma'am, one said carefully, you might want to take that seriously. Karen's voice cracked. You're ruining my life. I met her gaze without flinching. You did that all by yourself. The following week, the neighborhood buzzed with gossip. The once feared HOA enforcer was now the subject of every whispered conversation. Rumors spread that she'd been fined again, that the board was considering removing her entirely, that even the police were fed up. But I didn't care about the drama. I cared that Ethan could finally play in the yard again, blowing bubbles and laughing without fear. One evening, I sat on the porch watching him chase the sunset light across the grass. My sister came out, holding 2 mugs of coffee. Feels different now, doesn't it? She said. Yeah, I smiled. Like the air's lighter. She took a sip, smirking. I heard Karen's moving out. I raised an eyebrow. Seriously? She put her house up for sale this morning. I exhaled slowly. It wasn't satisfaction I felt. Not really. More like relief. She'll go find another HOA to terrorize, I said softly. But not this one. Ethan ran up just then, holding a tiny flower in his hand. For you, Mom, he said proudly. I knelt, taking it from him. Thank you, sweetheart. And in that moment, with the sun setting, the house peaceful, and the neighborhood quiet, I realized something important. Sometimes justice doesn't come from the courtroom. Sometimes it comes from standing your ground and protecting what matters most. As Ethan laughed beside me, I smiled. Karen's noise was gone. Peace had returned. And for once, silence felt like victory.